All right, good morning and welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
And together we are the Weekly Jargon, and we wanted to talk this morning about the recent incident that took place in Minnesota, Rohi.
Yeah.
Last Saturday, a lawful concealed weapon holder, Alex Preddy, was shot and killed by border officials. Again, and there was some outrage throughout the gun community because of how that video explicitly made it seem as if this guy was not really was a threat, but rather, just a bystander wanting to help someone.
Yeah.
So let's start off with that. We're going to start kicking off with some of our opinions here again. In this Weekly Jargon, we provide you a lot of opinion-based, but we go off of certain headlines that we read. And we'd love to get some conversation going. So, Rohi, go right ahead.
Yeah. Well, I guess here's where the divide is that, you got the general of Antifa, or this proposed general of Antifa, right after this happens, calling for essentially that side, whichever side you want to call them, to arm up, to like he's not sugarcoating it. He's saying literally grab your guns and essentially trying to incite a civil war, and backpedaling on a lot of that. When he kind of understands what he's really asking for, and so you kind of have this this one side that is again fed up, tired. And what starts to percolate out is reminding that side that not too long ago, just maybe 3-4 years back, when we had the riots going on, we had a young kid, and he brought an AR to basically patrol the streets during this protest and try to bring civil order, with the group of the people he had. His name was Kyle Rittenhouse, and that incident at the end, he gets chased after by a mob who starts attacking him, and he ends up shooting and killing 2 people and injuring a third. And at that time, I hate to say the left or the right, but the non-gun community was saying, how could you allow a gun at a protest? How could you let these people basically have arms during this kind of event? And they put him on trial. I mean, they wanted to hang him out to dry, and it was later shown through testimony that he was innocent. Now, we've come full circle, and we're essentially having the same conversation, saying like, hey, they were just protesting. This guy happens to have a concealed carry. It should be lawful. And it's amazing because now both sides are coming together and saying, you know what, we agree. You should have lawful, the ability to protect yourself at a protest. And why that's interesting is California last year, with the passage of Senate Bill 2, ushered in something very interesting to that. It's prohibited in California to carry a concealed weapon at a protest. It's illegal. So now we have this huge divide amongst the country that says, one side says, hey, yeah, what he did was right, and this was wrong that we essentially assassinated him. And we have California saying like, no, it's against the law. You can't do this. So.
Okay, but I mean, without trying to spin it,
yeah,
this is California. This happened in Minneapolis.
It is.
Plainview, where you have a video showing this gentleman. And again, not taking sides, but I'm looking at the video and how I believe a young lady was maced. He then went to her aid and tried to assist. He raised his hands up and said, hey, I'm just helping her out.
Yeah.
But I think because he resisted, and as they tackled him down, I mean, at least from what I saw in the video, and again, you could see different angles or different videos, but it seemed as if he was just trying to, hey, I'm good. But someone must have seen a gun, or I don't know that if he reached for it. I mean, obviously there's been different reports, but clearly from the video, I think it gave Americans an opportunity to see, hey, this guy was clearly not instigating.
Correct.
A fight or something to that nature. I think at the end, he was left with, hey, these guys are going to attack me, and they must have seen the gun. And obviously in that position where you're at, it's a thing of seconds.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's what really triggered the emotional reaction from a lot of people, not only from the gun world, but people that are just looking at, hey, is this government overreach? I mean, is this entity that's supposed to be enforcing our borders that's coming into cities, in many cases, almost like a police state, or I hate to use the word Gestapo, but almost in a way that people feel that this fear of government really coming in and terrorizing. And I use the words terrorizing because that's what's been heard over and over, is terrorizing the communities, right? Because not all people fit in that category of what they're after. And there's ways of doing that operation, whether you want to do it covert or you want to do it openly, especially in states that are in opposition of the current administration. Yeah. And I think that that's just another way of overreaching, but it's affecting people that have these concealed carry permits. And I think they should be concerned, because if this is happening to a fellow concealed weapon holder, then what does that mean for all those others? And here's the thing that I think struck me the most, Rohi, is that I've been through these classes, and I'm not saying that all those that go through it are going to have the best interest when they have them, right? But they go through it. Yeah. And they realize that having one is really, it can be very, very dangerous also. So you have to be very cautious, and when you use it, that's why it's called a concealed weapon. It's mainly for life-threatening events. So one can argue, was that a life-threatening event? Was I being threatened? Was I not being compliant? Yeah. And again, the Department of Homeland Security, they're going to say something different versus what people saw. So it's hard and it's contradicting, because what we see and what we hear from officials, it contradicts. And I think there's a lot of emotions attached to it. So I think that's the focus. And we had put up this picture before, I think several weeks back, we talked about concealed carry, right? Yeah. And, citizens that have armed themselves, but again, to protect themselves. And in this case, it seems like this community has now been impacted by this recent shooting.
Again, it goes, I know the initial reports when it first happened, again, the gun community as a whole came out and really wanted to defend the actions of the ICE agents, because again, if you're going to a known hot zone, and like you said, you took the class. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about in the class is, if I am taking a gun because I'm knowingly going to an area where I may use it, that is something that actually goes against your ability to carry, right? So, like I would usually tell students, if normally I don't go to that one shady liquor store down the street because it's kind of thuggy, but I'm gonna carry my gun tonight, and then all of a sudden you get into a shooting there where you have to shoot somebody, they're gonna ask those questions. Say, hey, why did you have your gun on you? Oh, well, because I know it's a rough neighborhood. Well, why didn't you go somewhere else? So that logic can be used somewhat against him to say, hey, why did you bring this gun to the protest? Oh, because I knew there was this agitation, there was a possibility to use it. Then why did you go to the protest? Yeah. You should have not been, or why did you involve yourself so much into that situation? So that's where you have the battle of both sides, is that you're taking a gun because you know that there may be potential for use. Well, then logic says you shouldn't be putting yourself into that potential for use. You should actually be more of somebody in the back. If you're there to truly protect other people, like you're kind of waiting if that moment comes about, not interjecting yourself saying, well, it's okay, I got a gun, I'm going to get involved in that.
And one can argue whether or not these were organized protests or not, but the question would be then, why not let the local law enforcement handle that? Why now federal enforcement to be there? Yeah. And I think the question goes back, and I'll throw it back, right? So now, is the federal government there to instigate maybe people to come out and maybe, you can only push so much before someone probably breaks within a society, or at least a community of people that have been, and to their words, they feel terrorized, or they feel like the government has overreach, right? And, in the Pew News, a Pew report, it does state that major groups, including the NRA, Gun Owners of America, And 2A and Second Amendment organizations have really come about and call for full transparency of the footage, so that, you know, if there is some accountable measures against the federal government, this would be the way to do it. Is, hey, let's make sure. I think looking at that video and that reaction with people, it does something to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can explain it the way you just did, and the federal government may have a story to it that says, hey, this gentleman came out knowing that we were going to have this protest and these people out here with armed, you know, federal agents.
Yeah.
And yet he decided to bring a concealed carry, right? I mean, you can spin
Yeah,
that story
you
that
can.
way. But as a concealed carry weapons holder, Rohi, I mean, what's the purpose of having one if you're not going to carry, regardless of where you go? There are certain exceptions where you may not carry them, but for the most part, I mean, you're carrying one for that reason.
Well, I guess for me, I would say that I think for a lot of these protesters, what they were used to, because you said the right thing. You know, we're used to having the people that are, I guess, keeping the peace in a sense are usually just law enforcement. You know, it's not that's kind of how it's been for especially the last couple of years of, you know, whoever's protesting on whichever side, the people on the side are law enforcement. They're just your local police officers, and you know, depending on which state this is going on, they've been given more of a direction of try to be least aggressive, like don't show force, like try to be accommodating, I guess, as much as you can say to the situation. Maybe a little too much, because, I mean, when fires or vandalism or something happens, they're also not taking action. And what's happening is this protest is federal level, and it's very clear that those agents have been given a completely different narrative. No, use force. No, do not hold back. You know, do not give any opportunity for, you know, like, oh, it's okay. No, the minute you see something, do something about it. And I think it's catching, if you want to say, the organized protesters, because they're used to they know their limits. They're very well trained. They know this is how far you can go. They're also trying to incite, you know, some of that action, because they need the footage, they need the video, because again, it fuels the people on their side. But what they're not used to is now the agents are more than happy to use the force, and they're going to use even more force than they're used to. Whether that's helping their side, I mean, it could be, because again, now you're getting the nation to kind of have a change of heart and say, hey, you know what, you know, maybe we are with the protesters, instead of saying, you know, yeah, hey, great job, you know, hitting them with pepper balls and all this craziness. Now we're going, wait a minute, maybe that is a little bit too much force. We weren't really looking for that. And wait a minute, what if I was that protester and I want to protest something else? Are you going to use that kind of force against me as well? And again, I think that's the unification here, is the both sides, left, right, whichever you want to sit on, are coming together and saying, like, wait a minute, what happened to peaceful protests? What happened for my ability to kind of be there, be safe, you know, again, carry a gun where I feel I need to? It's being eroded. And again, that's where I think you're seeing this shift of kind of, no, I don't like that. You know, I don't agree.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see that, especially with members of Congress that are on the GOP also starting to come out and start speaking against it, because whether or not the Renee shooting was an isolated incident, it's now a second incident.
Exactly. Yeah.
With similar patterns, right? Of, hey, maybe the first one was an accident. You know, people can see the footage, but I mean, when I'm not going to try to get into the details of that in the weeds. I think people can make an assumption of what took place and what happened, and they're going to react differently. Everybody's going to react differently depending on what news channel you're listening to and who's driving the narrative, right? But I think people that can see what's taking place, and it's taking place in these areas were highly urban, but again, a lot of the times they're blue states, right? They're not necessarily red states, they're blue states, and I think this was part of the initial plan for that administration, is to go after, to subjugate these folks and say, hey, this is the law. We're going to hire a lot more, which is fine. I mean, I think the immigration part of it is to control the immigration within its boundaries. But now that I think people are seeing that this is an overreach, that you're sending federal agents to do standard police enforcement. protest control,
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? I mean, you have a National Guard for crying out loud. And instead, you're using these federal agents that are coming in very rogue and not being sensitive to a lot of the communities. And I think this is what's driving up. At first, like you said, maybe people on the far right may be saying, yeah, get them right. But I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, don't forget that administrations change.
Mm-hmm.
And that department can be utilized as a weapon too for any other organization and or political party. So I think people have to wake up to see that, hey, you know, how much of the central government do you really want to enforce a lot of these rules, especially if they're state and or local? And I think this is where I think there's a fine line that needs to be drawn. And maybe that's been the overreach right now, that people feel that, you know, Border Patrol has really gone beyond that line. And it's being seen on both sides, because now, you know, these organizations, they're being viewed as potential threats in chaotic situations. So if an NRA or someone that's part of this CCW community, hey, if you have an arm, you are considered a domestic terrorist based on the definition of what's taking place out there. I mean, someone just has to say that narrative, Rohi, and essentially you double down on that, and you continue to express that on these social media channels. Before you know it, then maybe we are. People are going to consider that maybe we are. And that this is where you start disarming a nation that has held that spirit of the Second Amendment for many, many years.
Yeah, well, you know, we've talked about it before, is if we were to place ourselves 250 years ago with the founding of the nation, those people who founded the nation were domestic terrorists. I mean, in the eyes of what we would see today, they were people who took up arms, fought against, you know, the king, and formed their own like nation. Like, they were domestic terrorists, right? But we don't call them that. We call them heroes because they won and they formed our great nation that we have. But that's the difficult part when you fast forward to like today, and you know, people start trying to throw the word, you know, about civil war and all that kind of stuff. Well, who's the terrorist? Who's in the right? What are we moving towards? You know, and it can be very easily, like you said, construed that, oh, because I have a gun and because I don't agree with my government, therefore I'm a domestic terrorist. But is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing to be labeled just somebody who doesn't just want to say, hey, government, just do whatever you want to do. I'm just going to go with it. Oh, you want to disarm me? Oh, you want to do this? What's happening today is that I think it's the collective are just saying we're tired of it. We're tired of everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and not just this particular circumstance. We're tired of everything. This part is just showing that this is how far the government will go in using force against its own people.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I remember that was like Joe Biden's line where he said, basically we could never do anything because the government has F-16s and stuff like that. You know, they would take us out. You know, if you were to go against the government. And the joke at that time was understanding that that narrative could have been also used in Afghanistan and all these other countries we invaded. And look, they fought us off. They didn't allow us to take over. Here was your, grassroots people who defended against America, the greatest country, right? So I don't know where it's going with all this. I don't know, again, if it's going to continue to build. What I would caution people is people that are getting fueled by, I would say these like higher ups, because there's a lot of organization going into this. They're going to start fueling people to maybe do things they don't need to also, like I said, this Antifa general who's saying, get your guns and go out and basically like use real force against the government. But then at the same time saying, hey, send me a bunch of money, right?
Yeah.
You kind of see the thread to kind of say like, wait, is this just about money? Like you just want to try and get rich off this whole, thing going on right now. So I would just be very cautious to people kind of letting their emotions get ahead of them, and where they're saying that these people are saying, hey, go do these things, go stand up. And then they're in the background going like, yeah, it's okay.
So, it brings a good point, because I think you mentioned it earlier of how our founding fathers, but during that time of the King of England, after a very costly war in Europe, well, they passed that on to the colonies, and through the Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty, they decided that, hey, we have no representation, right? You're taxing us for goods, whether it's tea, cotton, or what have you, all these raw materials that these colonies were producing, and yet you're taxing the hell out of them, right? So I think they came up in arms and said, hey, this is not right. And after certain incidents that took place in Massachusetts and what have you, eruption, little small rebellions here and there, the king came down very heavy. And I think that kind of drew the line where they said, hey, let's form this Continental Congress and let's the colonies now decide if we want independence, because this is overreach on the king's side. We are, again, they were pushing that narrative that you should pull up in arms, that you should, hey, stand up for the rights of Americans, the freedom, at least for that at that time. And sure enough, a lot of these educated Englishmen that were in the colony said, well, let's form our own, Congress, and let's start making decisions, fund our own armies. We'll bring on, at that time, Commander Washington, made him a general, and there you go. And that's the story of the U.S. And we're celebrating, what is it, 250 years? 50 years, right? And that's crazy to think that, but that's kind of the way things started. I'm not saying that this is going that way, but you start seeing the inequities, or you start seeing these atrocities sometimes that take place, and I think people react with that. And what you need is someone that's very strong, that can push that narrative, and believe it or not, people begin to listen. And that's why they start gathering in masses to protest and say, hey, this isn't right. Now, is the protest going to do anything, or is it going to calm down? But I think you see these series of them happening over and over, and the more you see these violent attacks, and I think people react differently. For those that are, because the topic today is, what does that do for our CCW holders, right? I mean, how does that impact you if you're in one of these situations, or in these states that may be, you may see a concentration of federal agents coming in, and I mean, are you safe? Is this something that could potentially jeopardize your permit?
Yeah, again, if you take the California spin, it's understanding that, here in California, it's a prohibited action, that you are not allowed to be concealed carry at a protest. That's part of the new rules that came down. And again, not just that. I mean, we've talked about a little before that, and again, you can say why California has decided that, but also the idea of these, like, again, the militias, or the training of people in these aggressive acts is also against the law in California. So when you look at it, you realize that, maybe a lot of this doesn't happen in California because California has already demonized these kind of actions, right? Like if Minnesota or any of these places had where you can't have these, like, you can't conceal carry at a protest, that this guy would now be, there wouldn't we have this conversation, right? We would just say, oh, he's violating the law. It was a justified shooting to him. But we can't, because it was a legal thing he could do there. The forming of these groups, like, these protesters are organized. They're very trained. They're funded. I mean, you talk about, they show the food and the materials and everything that they're given. They talk about how even some of these that are in the mix, they're getting paid to be there. Because you got to remember, Jose, you're going to just stop working and all of a sudden just full-time protest with no money coming in? No, there's something to the lifestyle, right? Like, you're getting money, you're getting food. They give them, there's these places they can go live in. So.
I do feel that there may be a good amount of people that may be in that arena, but I do feel that a lot of them, just your standard Americans, normal Americans, that certainly want to see, regardless of what political stand they have, they want to be able to exercise their right of going out there, right? And yes, the people that are organizing are going to have a lot of influence. Hey, we're going to hold such and such deal, right? Yeah. And it's no different than when we see the Palestine people here, right? I mean, they participate in these organized locations, and they're out there with their signs and what have you, peacefully expressing their freedom of speech, and letting people know, this is what I feel. Now, looking outside in, people may say, well, what are you doing? These crazy radical groups are doing, right? I mean, yeah, but truthfully, what they're doing is they're just exercising. Now, are they highly organized, or are they just expressing their feeling of what's taking place, certain injustices that they feel. I've attended a couple of these here. I've been there myself, and I didn't go there organized. I went in there to see, okay, what's going on? I know you. You're business owners. You guys are from the community.
Yeah.
How can I assist you in maybe championing your cause, or just learning about what the cause is, right? And some people attend these in that fashion. Don't get me wrong. There are others that are more aggressive and want to see some action. And I think a lot of the times it's misconstrued, and sometimes they push that button that sometimes you can't get back from. You've already pushed that line, and therefore there may be some casualties, or there may be some harm done to some of these folks. But at the end, I don't think all of them are like that, especially when you have thousands and thousands of people marching down the street. I don't think they're all, hey, this is all one group.
Yeah.
That's being started by and funded by a certain organization. I do think there's some ringleaders maybe, and maybe they're the ones that are pushing the content out.
I don't know. I mean, we can disagree on that.
Oh yeah,
you know?
no, for sure. No, and I mean, even as we kind of close this out, you know, it is a tragic shooting. I mean, because you do see two powerful issues here, right? How far does the federal authority? How far is their reach? And then how safe are the gun owners now, especially when they want to exercise those rights of a CCW and or Second Amendment?
Yeah.
So I know that both gun supporters and or not the gun supporters, I think after looking at those videos, they come and they have consensus that, hey, maybe something wasn't right here. You know, this doesn't look right. And again, you're going to have those groups that are going to drive that narrative differently. And that could be something also that sparks continued tension amongst these two groups.
Agreed. Yeah.
So in California, though, Rohi, are we facing those issues? Let's bring it back here locally.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really see that here in Madera. We hope that doesn't come to our community, but we do see peaceful protests. And I think we support peaceful protests because we haven't had any issues where things get out of control, where you may need a National Guard and or, in this case, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
But again, okay, going back to again when we were talking about the open carry, the point of the protest, we like to throw the word peaceful and whatever. The point of the protest is to make a statement and look for change. And I think again, when we look back at the history of why California again closed off the open carry, is because it did work. It sent a message. It said, here we are, we have guns, and we're going to stand up for what we believe in. And what we're doing now is we're backpedaling and saying, well, wait a minute, you know, it should all be about peaceful protest, and we should just stand there. And they're realizing again, if you look at all the movements that happened in the last 5-6 years, they weren't effective because they were peaceful. They were effective because they were not peaceful. All of those movements at some point became, you know, agitated. They began vandalizing and burning and more destructive and showing the force, because that's what you have to do. You have to, at some point, show force, or else otherwise they just don't take you seriously. And I think that's the narrative that they've been given, and they go with it, and it's working. So to say, like, you know what, hey, there should be no guns, there should be no open carry, there should be, you know, it should be all peaceful. You shouldn't even be able to say anything. You shouldn't be able to yell at people. You can't get in people's faces. You know what I mean? You maybe got to be like 10 feet away from anybody that is a law enforcement agent. Like, at what point do you go, that's not the point of the protest. The protest is to get action, to get a change, or to stop something that's going on. So I know that's kind of the narrative is on the one side at this point, and it's becoming collective, is just to say that the aggression part, the scary part, unfortunately has to happen if they want true change, if they really want ICE or whatever the next thing is going to be. If they want them to stop and leave, they're going to have to realize they're outgunned. Like, this is not the right way to go. And I hate to say that. I'm not calling for people to go be aggressive in these situations, but understanding that that's why some people believe that, because again, right now the agents there believe they have the upper hand, and they do. They have they have more power, and they're willing to use it. That has to change.
I think the American public, being your citizens of this country, I think they try to abide by most laws, right? And governed by laws, because that's who we are. We're people that are governed by laws. And your conscience to try to go against that, I mean, it really has to take a certain breaking point for you to want to say, you know what, I'm taking up arms and I'm going to shoot the first thing that comes in there.
Yeah.
And we see that happen occasionally, right? You saw that with certain assassinations of certain CEOs, and you saw Charlie Kirk, and you saw, I mean, over our history, we've seen that. People no longer tolerate, and they said, well, we're going to go beyond our breaking point and just say, you know what, this is injustice, you know, but we're gonna make justice. But I think as a collective, you know, people move based on some of the people that are directing this deal, right? And the more violence you see, well, how do you respond to that? You can either become, you can either just put yourself in a fetal position and allow the government to do its job and its overreach, or you're going to stand up. And I think the history of, especially in American history, is people, citizens, have come up to the call where they rise up and they take action. Now, I'm not, and I don't think you are calling for any violent actions, but like you said, I think history has taught us that sometimes peacefully it's really hard to get any points across without casualties taking place to draw up that emotion and that force to want to make a change. And I think you're starting to see that because of this, several of the GOP leaders have seen, hey, this isn't what we bargained for. I don't think this was what I initially thought out would happen. And now it's starting to escalate to a point where, yeah, maybe not. This isn't something that I want to support. And they're starting to make their voices heard because these are the representatives of the people that are being affected. So I think that's drawing some change. And you're starting to hear that the administration may be pulling back now and talks with the governor and what have you. Again, these are changes that'll happen because of what's erupting.
Yeah.
But where that leads, Rohi, that's a good question. I think we can bring up some updated news maybe next week. But as we're wrapping up, any last comments you want to throw in there?
No, I would just hope that was hopefully the last form of action like that, and hopefully that, you know, something can be resolved. You know.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Rohi. And again, for all those people that have been impacted by that, you know, our hearts go out to you and our condolences to the family of those folks that have been affected. But with that, we'll go ahead and leave you now. We look forward to coming back next week, bringing you an update. Thank you again for watching, and you have a great day.